Good morning, everybody. Today we'll be talking about a little more terminology, more about the tooth structure, the infrastructures that are surrounding the tooth, and the anatomy of the tooth inside through outside. And then we're going to be talking about the numbering systems of the teeth. Alright, so last session we gave a quick question: how many anterior teeth, posterior teeth are in permanent and primary dentition, and how many are in each arch? If you got it right, then your answer would be like this. In a permanent dentition, there are 12 anterior teeth and 20 posterior teeth. Remember, we have 32 teeth in the adult dentition in general, 6 anterior teeth in the maxillary arch, and 6 anterior teeth in the mandibular arch, giving us 12 anterior teeth and 20 posterior teeth, with all the premolars and molars, including the third molars. Never forget, even if they're missing, you still have to count them. And in each arch, there are 6 anteriors and 10 posteriors. There you go. In a primary dentition, we have 20 teeth in the primary dentition. So if you divide them up, there are 12 anterior teeth and 8 posterior teeth. Remember, they don't have premolars and they don't have the third molars, just first and second molars. And in each arch, it's going to be 6 anteriors and 4 posteriors. Easy, right? Alright, so let's move on to the lesson today. Today, we're going to talk about the tooth itself. It's pretty interesting how the tooth is made up. For now, the very basic thing I want you guys to know is that a tooth is divided into two parts, two main parts. You have a crown and you have the root. The root is usually embedded in the bone, and it's the part that we cannot see of the tooth. And the crown is always the part that's showing in our mouths. It's usually often called the clinical crown. Okay, so crown and root, just remember that. Now, for the tooth itself, if we dissect the tooth into two halves and we see what's inside, this is what it looks like. We're going to start with the most outer layer, this whitish layer over here on the clinical crown, and it's called enamel. Enamel is the outermost layer. It's a white color, and it's in the crown area, right here. You can see it. Everybody has it. Now, the distinctive part of this enamel is that sometimes, when you feel sensitivity while brushing your teeth or drinking something really hot or really cold, that means the enamel is a little bit thinner than it's supposed to be. It's a thick layer. It's a see-through layer that you can see all the underlying structures beneath it. So when you feel sensitivity, just know that it's your enamel wearing down. Enamel cannot be regenerated, so once you lose enamel, you can never restore it. The only way to restore it is with dental restorations. Alright, off to the second layer. It's the dentin. The dentin is the second layer in the crown area. It's usually yellowish in color. It's very thick, and it's only till the crown layer. Don't let this drawing fool you that it's all connected all the way down. I'll explain what it is later. So the dentin has all of the tubules and the connection from the pulp chamber, I'll explain this now, onto the enamel. So it's the part that causes the sensitivity. It's the part that you feel that something is too hot, too cold, or, okay? Alrighty. And then the third layer, we're going to go down all the way to the root, and this part of the tooth, and what you see this little white part, well, it's not really divided from the yellow part. They're actually one layer, and it's called cementum. Okay? It's the surface layer of the root. So whatever's surrounding the root is called cementum. Alright? Now, for the part that's inside, with all these nerves and blood vessels and all that good stuff, is called the pulp. Pulp is part of the center of the tooth. Usually it goes from the bottom of the crown all the way down to the root, okay? You have nerves, connective tissues, and cells called odontoblasts. Odontoblasts are the cells that differentiate and make up the parts of the teeth, okay? So we're going to have enamel in the crown, and then the second layer is going to be dentin. For the root area, it's going to be cementum, and then all the way inside is going to be the pulp, okay? Thus let's focus a little bit on the pulp area. It looks like it's going up and down, up and down. You have all these curvatures in the pulp. The very top parts of the pulp is called the pulp horn. Okay, how it's going up like this and then down and up like this. As you notice, it follows the curvature of the tooth. So whatever the enamel and dentin layer look like, see how it's following the curvature of the enamel and dentin. It goes up and down, up and down. Usually pulp horns follow the curvature of the enamel and dentin. Okay? And in primary teeth, it's usually bigger and wider. And as we progress in age, it becomes smaller, and sometimes it doesn't even have that curvature. It loses that curvature over time. But this is the normal anatomy. Okay, and then after we've discussed these little horns, the pulp horns, we come into this little box. This box that's kind of between the crown and the roots is called the pulp chamber. It's like a little tiny box that has all your vessels and your nerve endings, and sometimes the nerve endings extend into the dentin, okay? So we have pulp horn, and then now pulp chamber, and now we're going to go to the most bottom part of the pulp chamber, which is called the pulp floor. This is the pulp floor, okay? So usually when we have a root canal, we're going to drill through the tooth all the way in until it opens up into the pulp chamber. And you want to make sure that when you're drilling into the tooth that you don't hit the pulp floor, because this is a really critical area. It cannot be restored again. Alrighty. Now, we have something called, after the pulp floor, we have pulp horn, pulp chamber, pulp floor, and now we come to this little tiny opening into the roots that's called an orifice. An orifice is a narrow opening between the chamber and the canal. This is the chamber, and this long part over here in the root is called the canal. Now the orifice is between them. Okay, it's a very tiny opening. And then we'll talk about the root canal now. This is the root canal over here. It's a root cavity. It's only in the root, and it's filled with the pulp tissue. Remember, pulp tissue is composed of cells, nerves, and blood vessels. Okay, as we progress downwards all the way into the root canal, we reach the end of the tooth. At the end of the tooth right here, it kind of looks like the orifice all over again, but it's like at the very end, and it's called apical foramen. Foramen means opening, and apical means the very bottom of the tooth, okay? Apical foramen. This part of the tooth is called the apex. That's where apical came from. Apex is the very end of the tooth, and apical foramen is the opening at the very end of the tooth. So now when you're doing a root canal and you're filling the canals in, you have to stop at the apical foramen. You can't go beyond that. Alright? Now, for the structure surrounding the tooth itself, we're done now with the tooth, the anatomy. We've discussed enamel, we've discussed dentin, cementum, the pulp chamber, everything about the pulp chamber, okay? And now we're going to discuss what's surrounding the tooth, what's going on around the tooth, okay? The most important one that you have to remember is the periodontal ligament. You see this pink part that's between, so this is the bone, this is your jawbone, and this is the cementum. This pink stuff right here is called periodontal ligament. Periodontal ligament is a specialized group of connective tissue fibers that attach the tooth to the bone, okay? So it's kind of like, you know how when you have, I think they're called suspenders in the car, when you have the wheels of the car attached to the car, but then when you hit a bump, it's like a smooth bump inside the car. Okay, so the periodontal ligament kind of has the same function. So let's say you have massive force on the tooth, right? While chewing, the tooth is going to bounce a little bit in and out because it has that periodontal ligament cushion that's protecting it, okay? But at the same time, it attaches the tooth to the bone. The tooth is not directly attached to the bone, okay? That's going to be an abnormality. So, periodontal ligament, okay? And then, the bone is called alveolar bone, okay? It's in the maxilla and in the mandible, and it contains the tooth socket. Tooth socket is, you see how The bone is shaped right to the tooth. Okay. If you happen to extract this tooth, you're going to be left with the shape of the roots like this. And this is called tooth socket. Okay. Alright, so remember about the pulp chamber. Now, we have the horns, we have the pulp chamber, we have the floor, the orifice, the root canal, the apical foramen. Now, when we have the root canal, you have a main root canal, correct? We have one on each side. Now, if you can see those little lines that are projecting from the main root canal, those are also canals, but they're called lateral canals, or also accessory canals, because they're not part of the main one. They're just accessory. And these are an extension of the original root canal. It's part of the tooth system. Almost every tooth has accessory root canals, and it can be a little bit challenging when doing a root canal because you gotta fill all these little guys to make sure there's no bacteria trapped in there. Alrighty? And then you have the gingiva, this pink part right here, right? We can all see it. When you look into your mouth, you can see that your mouth is filled. All your teeth have these scalloped pink stuff. This is, the medical term for it is gingiva. It's a soft tissue lining in the mouth surrounding all the teeth, right? We usually go by, oh, the gums. Now that you're a dentist, you can say it's called the gingiva. Okay? And we're going to talk more about what kinds of gingiva we have in our mouth. So for the structures surrounding the tooth, we got the alveolar bone over here. We got the tooth socket, periodontal ligament, the pink stuff, and the gingiva. And of course, we have the lateral canals to the main root canal. Okay, so here we're going to talk a little bit more about the gingiva. I want you to imagine that this is the tooth. I hope it's not too complicated for you. This is the tooth. If you just look into the mirror and you look to your central incisors, right, you're going to see that the tooth is coming out of the gingiva right here. And the gingiva extends all the way to the top, all the way to the inside of your lip, right? Of course, there's bone here, alveolar bone. Now, we can divide the gingiva into two, just to make it easier for you guys. We're going to divide it into free gingiva, this little part over here. This is called free gingiva, and the rest of this is called attached gingiva. Now, common sense, free gingiva means it's not attached. It's free. There's like a little mini pocket over here. It's movable. In the attached gingiva, you cannot move it. It's right there. It's attached to the bone. Okay, so we'll start with the free gingiva, or called marginal gingiva, because it's right at the margin. It's unattached tissue surrounding the tooth like a collar. Okay, so when you wear like a nice formal shirt, you have the collar part that you have to button up to your neck. That's what the free gingiva is kind of to the tooth itself. Okay, it contains a sulcus. A sulcus is another term for a little pocket. It's about 1.5 to 3 millimeters deep. Okay, that's the normal depth of any sulcus or any pocket. If it's bigger than that, then you have bone loss and periodontal problems. But just know that the normal range is 1.5 to 3 millimeters deep. Okay? And then we're going to talk about here, the gingival sulcus. It's a small pocket. So when you floss and you go in between the teeth, surrounding each tooth, you go in between the tooth and the marginal gingiva. And that's where the floss enters into the sulcus. That's what keeps it clean, and you keep the pocket depth up to 3 millimeters. Okay? And then we have the attached gingiva. It's a band of light pink area that is firmly bound to the underlying bone. So it's very important that there's bone under it, and the attached gingiva attaches to it. Now, the bone has to be a certain height and width for the gingiva to be attached to it. Now, the more you have bone loss, and let's say the bone is until here, you're going to see that the attached gingiva is going to follow it, and it's going to drag the marginal gingiva with it, and then you're going to have recession. Like parts of the tooth are going to start showing, like the root, which it's not supposed to happen, but complications happen if there is bone loss. So attached gingiva is going to follow the underlying bone. Okay. Now we're going to talk about mucogingival junction. Mucogingival junction. It's an area between the attached gingiva and the alveolar mucosa. Okay, so this is attached gingiva, and technically all the tissue that's more to the bone, to the larger side of the bone, the more you go down, is called alveolar mucosa. Alveolar from bone, alveolar. And if you just open your mouth and you pull your lip out, okay, you're going to see that maybe the first 3-4 millimeters that from the marginal gingiva that's attached to your tooth all the way up is going to be like a nice bright pink. And then all of a sudden you see like a line, and then it's going to turn like into a darker pink, like reddish pink. That line is called mucogingival junction. And the reddish pinkish area that's darker on the top of the line is called alveolar mucosa. It's unattached gingiva, red, smooth, and shiny, lies between the gums and the lips, and between the cheeks and the floor of the mouth. So you can see as you move your lip left and right, that part, that alveolar mucosa, moves with you because it's unattached. Okay? So just take a look in your mouth when you're going over the tooth structures here. And as you're reading each one, just look into your mouth and see where it's located. It's going to be easier for you to remember. Okay? So we discussed the marginal gingiva, the socket, the attached gingiva, the mucogingival junction, second line, okay, and the alveolar mucosa, which is a darker red pinkish color. All right, so today I discussed that we're going to talk about the numbering systems. And there we have 3 numbering systems, but we don't go by all of them. But you should learn all of them, just for reference. Now, if you're an international student, just like I am, you would be in your country, you would be using one numbering system, and then in another country they would be using a different one. So it's good to know all 3 of them. Okay, so we have 3. The universal one, also known as the ADA system. This one is the most commonly used. This one I can guarantee you that every dentist in the world uses this system. And then you have the international FDI system. This is the system we used in my country. And the Palmer system. It's the least used, but it's also good to know. So I think we're going to be starting with the universal system. Okay, so the universal system is super easy. I'll tell you why. All you need to know is the numbers from 1 to 32. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way until 32. All right? How are we going to start? We're going to start with, remember how I told you our mouth is divided into quadrants? So I want you guys to go to the upper right quadrant in your mouth. Upper right quadrant is going to be on your right cheek, on the top, on the maxilla. You go all the way to the back. Now, if you happen to have all your 3rd molars in, then it's your lucky day because it's going to be easier for you to count. The first tooth you're going to be counting is your upper right 3rd molar. Again, upper right 3rd molar. Okay? Even for those who don't have it, if it's not there, if you had it extracted, it's still the first tooth. So that's going to be number 1. And then you're going to have the 2nd molar, number 2, 1st molar, number 3, 2nd premolar, number 4, the 1st premolar, number 5. I've had mine extracted because I had ortho treatment. I had braces. If you had braces as well and it's not there, still count it as number 5, okay? Your canine, your cuspid is going to be number 6. Lateral is going to be number 7. Central is going to be number 8. Okay, this is the first quadrant. This is the upper right quadrant. 1 to 8, right? Now we're going to go to the 2nd quadrant. The 2nd quadrant is going to be your upper left quadrant, to be on your left cheek. So the first tooth in your upper 2nd quadrant is the central incisor. You got it. Number 9. Lateral incisor number 10. Canine number 11, and so on until you reach the 3rd molar, number 16. So every time you count using the international system, you're going to have teeth in the maxillary arch and 16 other teeth in the mandibular arch. Number 1 is always going to be the third molar in your upper right quadrant. Number 16 is going to be your third molar from the upper left quadrant. Okay, so we have the upper right quadrant, that's quadrant number 1, that's where you're going to start counting, and then you're going to go over to the upper left quadrant, that's the second one, and then the third quadrant is going to be right below the second quadrant. It's going to be your lower left quadrant, okay? So you're going to go 1 from the right, 2 to the left, you're still on the left, 2 to 3 on the bottom on the left, okay? And it's going to be your third molar on the bottom, that's going to be 17, and then you're going to go forward, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. That's the end of your third quadrant, right? That's the lower left third quadrant. And then now you're going to cross the midline. Remember the midline? Okay, now this is your fourth quadrant, your fourth and last quadrant, the lower right, 25, 26, 27, all the way till 32. That's it. That's the universal ADA system. So when someone tells you, when you're talking with a fellow dentist, right, be like, I have a problem with tooth number 10. You should automatically know, okay, this is the upper left lateral. I have a problem with number 3. That's the first molar in the upper right quadrant. Okay? That's what I want you to remember. It's going to be easy. The more you practice it, the more you're going to be good at it. Just remember, count your teeth in the mirror. 1, 2, 3. You're always going to start from the upper right, moving up to the upper left, and then all the way down to the lower left, and you're going to go all the way back to the lower right. Okay? Just remember this sequence and you'll be fine. This is for permanent teeth. The same goes for primary teeth. The same exact concept. Except for, instead of using numbers, we're going to use letters. It's easier for the kids, you know? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, up till T. Okay? It's the same exact concept. So if you have little siblings that still have their primaries in, that would be a great time to tell them, hey, can you open up? Let me see what you got in there. Okay? Even if they have missing teeth, you're going to count them. But let me tell you, in the primary teeth, if they have only the primaries, that's great. It's going to be A, B, C, D. But let's say they shed their central incisors and they had permanent incisors. They're not going to be letters anymore. You're going to have to say 8 and 9. Like me? So it's going to be A, B, C, D, 8, 9, G, H, J, K. Okay? So just keep that in mind. If it's a permanent tooth, automatically it's going to be a number. If it's a primary tooth, it's going to be a letter. Even when they're in the mixed dentition, that's the best time to see, okay, what primaries does he have? So which ones are going to be letters? Which permanents does he have? Which are going to be numbers, okay? Easy. This is the main one. This one you should know by heart. You should know right off the bat when someone tells you the number of the tooth. Every dentist in the world uses this system, okay? Alright, so now let's move on to the next system. The next system, the international system. This is an easy system as well. Now, remember how we have 4 quadrants? Okay, now, in this system, you're going to start numbering, instead of from all the way in the back, like the universal system, we're going to start counting from the midline. Okay, remember how I told you, you start off with the upper right quadrant, and then you move to the upper left quadrant, and so on? Okay, it's the same concept. So, each quadrant is going to have a number. The upper right quadrant is going to have number 1. The upper left quadrant is going to have number 2. The lower left quadrant is number 3. The lower right quadrant is number 4. Can you see the numbers in each quadrant? Okay. Now, in this system, each tooth has 2 numbers. Now, these numbers are not said 11, 12, 13, no. You're going to say each number individually. The first number, 1, is going to indicate the number of the quadrant. So when I say 1, you're gonna go, okay, so she's talking about the upper right quadrant. And then the first tooth is the tooth closest to the midline in that quadrant, which happens to be the central incisor. So it's going to be 1, 1. Central incisor is 1, 1. The tooth right next to the central incisor is the lateral incisor, so you can say 1, 2. The canine, 1, 3. Premolar, 1, 4. The second premolar, 1, 5, and so on. That's the first quadrant. Okay? The maxillary right quadrant. Now, we're going to move to the maxillary left quadrant. That's the second quadrant. So you're going to start it with 2. And the central incisor is tooth number 1. So you're going to say 2, 1. Lateral incisor, 2, 2. Canine, 2, 3. Okay? So each tooth from the midline is going to be from central 1 to all the way back to the third molar. That's going to be 8. Okay? That's in each quadrant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have to put the quadrant number before the number of the tooth. Quadrant number 1 is for maxillary right. Quadrant number 2, maxillary left. And then we have quadrant number 3, mandibular left. You're going to go the exact same sequence as we went in the universal system. You're going to go from central incisor, central lower incisor, 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 3, the canine, 3, 4, the first premolar, 3, 5, second premolar, and so on. And in the last arch, the mandibular right, you're going to go the same way. 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, 3. So this system is a little bit easier to remember only because you have less numbers to remember, 1 to 8, instead of 1 to 32, right? And your arches are already numbered. So automatically you're going to know if I tell you, I have a problem with number 3, 5. You're going to know, okay, number 3, 5. Number 3 is the third quadrant, which is the mandibular left. And then you're going to say number 5, oh, okay, that's the second premolar. Understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now, for the primary teeth, it's the exact same concept, except that it's like a continuum. Instead of arches 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is for the permanent dentition. For the primary dentition, it's like a continuum. 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the same. 5 is going to be maxillary right arch, 6, maxillary left, 7, mandibular left, and last 8, mandibular right. And it's the same. But they only have 5 teeth. They're so tiny. Okay? 5, 1, 5, 2, 5, 3, 5, 4, 5, 5. Alrighty? Now remember, the same goes here. If the child is in mixed dentition and they have, let's say, I don't know, 5, 1 missing, his central incisor, okay? And you have a permanent one, it's going to go to 1, 1. I need you guys to remember this. In any system, it's going to be the same. Okay? This is the system we used in my country, in Saudi Arabia. I don't know where else they use it around the world. I don't know if they use it in Libya, if they use it in any other country, but it's a pretty good system. And now in the States, they use the universal system. It took me a while to remember this, but it's not so bad. It's easy once you get the hang of it. You just gotta keep repeating it to yourself. Okay. This is I put this because it's a little bit of an explanation, just in case you need a little more to read and to make it easier for you. Okay, so if you're facing any difficulty, you can always go back to the slide and see the explanation to the system. Okay, so to the third system. The third system is called polymer system. Now this is a little bit different, okay? In this system, we have numbers, just like in the international system, okay? It's the same concept. We're going to start from the midline, and each tooth closer to the midline is going to have number 1, and all the way back it's going to go to 8 in each arch. Now, to differentiate between the arches in the international system, we had 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, in this system, we're going to have these little brackets, okay? And the way, the direction of the bracket is going to indicate which arch it's in, okay? So you have to memorize that this type of arch right here is for the maxillary right. This is for maxillary left, mandibular left, and mandibular right. Okay? It's like you're drawing the corner of the tooth Like imagine if this is your central incisor, you're drawing the corner of the tooth to show that, okay, this is to the right, this is to the left. And the line is going to go closer to the midline. So if it's closer to the midline on this side, you're going to know, okay, this is the left one, and this is going to be the right one. Okay? And it's the same for the primary teeth, except that it's letters. That's all it is. The only time that it's not letters is in the international system. Okay. This system is not really used that often. Um, I'm not sure why, maybe because it's a little bit more complicated than the other systems, but for sure, I'm telling you right now, just focus on the universal system. Know the other systems, the international and this polymer system, just in case you run into someone who still uses this system, you would know what they're talking about, but the universal system is the one you're going to depend on mostly. Okay? Alright, so that's it for today, and I put a quick question for you. What anatomical structure is usually found between the first and second premolar? Now, I didn't discuss this in class today, but I would like you guys to do some research and see what anatomical structure lies between it. It's a very important question, and we will discuss it in the next lecture. Take care.